Man, this McDonald's is delicious. Wait, I gotta go take a shower. Man, isn't it weird how as a kid eating McDonald's is a victory, but as an adult it's a defeat?
Hey guys, welcome back to another shower thought. It was a pretty good one. Mm-hmm. That shower, Mario enjoyed himself in there.
Yeah.
Eating that burger, all soggy.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to try that now. I'm just gonna, every time I get McDonald's, because I get it all the time.
You save, honestly, like, you could save time. You brush your
Yeah.
teeth in there, you eat in there, you can do a lot of things in there.
Yeah.
If you're in the morning, if you're in a rush,
Yeah. Who gets McDonald's in the morning?
there's a breakfast, McDonald's breakfast.
Like you leave your house and then come back?
Am I the only one that gets... Eating McDonald's as a kid was
Yeah.
considered a victory, but eating McDonald's as an adult is a defeat.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that tie into our topic of today, our shower thought?
Talking about intake here. I mean, it kind of makes sense. As a kid, I remember actually we eat a lot of Dippin' Dots. McDonald's used to sell it, and I was so glad I
They
used to
had
eat it.
Dippin' Dots?
They had it, yeah. As in kindergarten, I literally almost every morning I'd pull up and I'd get it.
What? You drove?
I drove a 5-year-old Edward rolling up and I'd get it. And as a kid, I was excited. But now, if I'm driving home and I have to get McDonald's, I mean, I don't feel the best because you kind of know that it's unhealthy. Then you kind of know it's in general just what's in there.
I just feel like so much judgment towards myself.
You judge yourself.
Eating. Yeah. All right, but anyways, we are talking about intake, and usually when you buy McDonald's, you intake it. So that's what leads us into our topic.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be talking about self-control, about what you are taking in, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and how everything kind of comes from whatever you put into your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And in Proverbs 4:23, it says, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So whether good or bad, it's going to be flowing from your heart.
Take an example of Solomon.
Yeah.
This guy, I feel like you can kind of use a lot of it with intake.
Yeah.
Initially, he started off his life, he was the son of David. And when David was already on his deathbed, he was preparing the temple for Solomon to build. And Solomon also had a lot of things on his shoulder. He kind of understood the value of sacrifice, understood the value of honoring God, of loving God. So he started sacrificing to God. He sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings. That kind of just shows the size of his sacrifice and also his wealth, his dedication, his heart to God. And God saw the sacrifice. God saw his heart. He was pleased. And in a dream later, I don't know, maybe that night, a couple nights, it doesn't say, but in a dream later, God asked him, what do you want? And Solomon, recognizing all the pressure on his shoulder, following in the footsteps of his dad, King David, which people know as the great King David that liberated so many. He's a great warrior. Mm-hmm. Trying to follow in those footsteps, fill those shoes. He's like, God, you've placed this kind of trust on me. I don't know what to do. I don't know how I'm supposed to, treat these people, talk to these people, make them feel like that I want to lead them. So he asked for wisdom. God, help me to be able to connect with him. And God was actually super surprised, pleased with him, saying that, okay, good thing you didn't ask for money, wealth, fame, or just victory over your enemies, right? So I'm going to give you wisdom, but I'm also going to bless you with these things that you didn't ask for, and a long life, assuming you follow my decrees. And the very first wise thing that he did was, as soon as he woke up, he rejoiced, he went and he sacrificed and went to the temple again. He threw a banquet and he praised God. It's kind of like the parable, or not even the parable, the story in Jesus when he heals the lepers, and only one of them returns. And, being grateful for that. And Solomon recognized that.
So Solomon gets all this wisdom, and he's living life, and I'm sure he had moments where he slipped up, and, he wasn't perfect. He wasn't Jesus. Mm-hmm. But there was a point, he was good from the beginning, and then he started intaking bad things. The wives that worshipped idols, and so he stopped guarding his heart.
Yeah. And
it started resulting in a sinful life. And so he started actually not living, the wise life that he was kind of called to be. So he slipped up, but instead of getting back up, which I'm sure that he's done plenty of times too, but this time he actually stayed down. And in Proverbs 24:16, it says, the godly may trip 7 times, but they will get up again. But one disaster is enough to overthrow the wicked.
Yeah, looking into self-control, let's take some practical examples. Yeah. Jealousy. instant consequences from some sin aren't noticeable until later. I mean, one of the commandments is do not. I forget exactly what it says, but it talks about jealousy and envy, and don't look to your neighbor for something that you don't have. Right? It can start off with an innocent, just like, oh man, I wish I had that car, or the car's a little bit too big. I wish I had those kind of sunglasses. I don't know, something small like that. You become envious over. That's something you dwell on. Then realizing what you don't have, you start to lack, happiness, joy.
Yeah.
You kind of look past the things that God has already given you. He's already given you literally a house, somewhere to sleep, some food to eat. He's given you these things, but your jealousy and envy for that small thing trumps any joy that you receive from that stuff, and then eventually it can even result into something bigger, like stealing. So that some sin aren't noticeable until later, but then obviously some sins have instant consequences. You can look at murder with instant consequences. You go to jail. Sexual immorality, the Bible talks about it, how it's a sin against your own body. We can take a look at video games, self-control. Initially it doesn't seem like you're wasting too much time. You spend 2 hours a day, 1 hour a day. Sometimes I'd spend, looking back, I think maybe when I was like a freshman or like in eighth grade, I'd spend easily like an entire Saturday, probably around 10 hours just playing video games. I mean, right now I have nothing to show for it besides my knowledge of Minecraft, but I mean, hey, that's impressive enough, right? Right. But if you actually look at it, the total time somebody can spend from the age of 12 to 22, this is just like an average example. Average time that a male spends from the age of 12 to 22 playing video games is 10,000 hours, right? And then 10,000 hours, let's say, assume instead of spending all that time playing video games, you spend that time doing something. You spend that time, you can easily memorize the New Testament. You can learn Hebrew and Greek. You can learn new languages, play instruments. That's assuming that you can actually dedicate this time for video games for specifically learning these things. Obviously, no 12-year-old is going to have that revelation like, I just want to memorize the New Testament. Unless there's some of those out there. But that kind of shows how much you compound your time, right? If you don't notice, you're like, okay, I can throw an hour here for YouTube. I can throw 2 hours there for Netflix. Look at it in the long run, right? So kind of like Solomon. He didn't spend his time wisely. He ended up falling from God. He definitely initially was a wise king. There was parables where the two prostitutes came and they were like, this is my baby, this is my baby. And then he showed his wisdom, and eventually through that he gained fame. And then instead of spending more of his time in the Word, in the Torah, or in the Bible, he spent it, doing his own things, looking for money, looking for, collecting things and everything like that.
Doing things that were like displeasing to God.
And so looking at towards the end of his life, he actually wrote the book Ecclesiastes. Chapter 1, verse 17. Kind of summarizes this is the first chapter, but then we're going to read later chapter 12, but this is chapter 1, and this is his initial thoughts on his life that he lived, because Ecclesiastes was towards the end of his life. Then I applied myself to understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly, but I learned that this too is chasing after the wind. He's saying here, everything, even understanding wisdom that may look good, like understanding, okay, I want to learn these languages, I want to learn everything, or madness and folly, that's partying, that's having fun, that's not spending your time wisely. He took these both approaches, but it's chasing after the wind. It's meaningless unless God is at the center of it. So no matter what he took, whether it was something that's quote unquote good or bad, if God wasn't in the middle of it, in the center, it's worthless.
Yeah. Let's actually talk about what's the difference, good intake, bad intake, because I mean, like you're saying, is whether good or bad, it was worthless without God, but still, we probably would prefer good intake over bad intake. So good intake, that's doing things that are pleasing to God. For example, even when Solomon, when he asked for wisdom, God was pleased with him. And so when you're doing things that are pleasing to God, they could be even playing the piano, hanging out with friends, the right friends, whether you're around friends that are bad influence or a good influence. There's a difference of which one you're spending time with too. And when you have good intake, when you're taking things in that are good and edifying, you end up coming to God and asking him to use you, because you end up being a lot less selfish. You become selfless because you just want to be used by God, and God becomes the center of it. And when you have good intake, it'll show when you have to respond to either an emotion or a situation that's happening. For example, even with what's going on, your response to it, what you've been intaking over the course of months, weeks, years even, it's now kind of being put on display. because that's what you were taking in, because naturally what you're putting in is going to flow. And consistency with good intake. So it's important to recognize what is good intake. Reading the Bible, good intake. Spending time in the Word, or that is exactly what I just said. I just rephrased it.
Reading the Bible, spending time in the Word,
spending time with God. Spending time with God, and then Jesus too.
I like to pray. I like to talk to God. I like to converse with Him.
Yeah. So all of the above, they're good. Recognizing that they're good, and then being consistent with that, so that that's what can overflow. On the other hand, we have bad intake. Bad intake is actions, conversations, hobbies that you're doing that are displeasing to God. So it's going against what God is asking you to do. But when you're doing bad intake, when you have bad intake, you end up becoming really selfish, because every time you come to God, you're asking God to fix you. You're asking God to like figure out your issues that you're bringing to Him now, because you're like, hey God, I messed up again. I messed up here. I spent my time here. I wasted my time. Can you fix it? You know? So you end up becoming really selfish in that sense. So that's kind of the difference between the good and the bad intakes.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. You can kind of check the maturity of yourself if it's just how you come into prayer, asking people to bless. Okay, cameraman, I'm joking.
Tells us to put our earphones on airplane mode. Consistency.
Yeah, consistency. Okay, so we can tie all this in with James.
Yeah.
James 1, kind of what we talked about last week.
Yeah.
And then
Proverbs
Proverbs 24.
Watch it.
Shameless plug. Proverbs 24:16 talked about how righteous men may fall 7 times, get back up. The usual foolish man may fall and then just stay down there. Right. Consistency. Basically, the righteous, somebody that's well, that has good intake, has consistency and righteousness with them. It's not your inability to fall, because it's inevitable that you are. But basically that. Arthur, what are you doing back there? I'm so confused. Basically, James talked about endurance, endurance, testing in faith. Proverbs says, continue on, fight on forward.
Yeah.
Solomon tried both good and bad intake, but both are foolish without God, right?
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Be consistent in the good intake. Be consistent in the Word, in reading the Bible. Be consistent in that.
Yep, yeah. So a good way to wrap it up is in Ecclesiastes, that book that he wrote, where he was talking about the things that he tried, and he's like, it's all meaningless. So I'm going to be reading from chapter 12, verses 13 to 14, but I'm not actually going to read the verses. I'm going to read, I think, commentary, right? It's called commentary.
Yeah.
I'm going to read the commentary from my Bible, and it says, all people will have to stand before God and be judged for what they did in this life. We will not be able to use life's inconsistencies as an excuse for failing to live properly. To live properly, we need to 1, recognize that human effort apart from God is futile. Number 2, put God first now. Number 3, receive everything good as a gift from God. Number 4, realize that God will judge both good and evil. Number 5, know that God will judge the quality of every person's life. How strange that people spend their lives striving for the very enjoyment that God gives freely.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point to end on. God has everything to give you.
Yeah.
It's just up to us if we want to choose to take it or not, to intake what He has in store for us.
Including good, like if you spend all your time doing the good, but do it with God in the center of it, so that there's actually a reflection of it.
So it is what you're taking in. What in the world? Is what you are taking in feeling like a victory right now, but look into the future, will it be a defeat? So take that in right now.
Yeah.
Look at yourself. Look at the habits you're doing.
What are you spending your time doing? What are you spending all this quarantine time doing?
Yeah.
So
if you fast forward in the future, is it going to benefit you? Is it going to take from you?
Yeah. Calculate the hours that you're spending, like 10 hours on video games or 20 hours, spending time with friends, social media, whatever it is. Anyways, we'll be back next week. Comment your guys' favorite shower thoughts. Maybe it'll end up in the next one.
Of course. Comment.
Bye.